Hello, YouTube! Tonight's story is about Zoe, whose cheating boyfriend is exposed by a mysterious female hacker named Remy, and the dangerous tenderness that follows. Because sometimes the truth that ruins your life is also the first door to a love honest enough to stay. The first thing I learned about heartbreak was that it had excellent file organization. I do not mean that poetically. I mean the folder that arrived on my laptop at 11:43 on a Tuesday night was labeled with a date, a name, and a word so clean it felt obscene. Evidence. I had been sitting cross-legged on my living room floor in an old Knicks t-shirt I had stolen from Marcus during the sweet, stupid age of our relationship, when we still called theft intimacy, eating sesame noodles straight from the carton and pretending I was not watching the 3 dots beneath his last unread message. He had said he was at a client dinner in Tribeca. He had said not to wait up. He had said a lot of things over the years, most of them with the smooth confidence of a man who had discovered that my love made an excellent hiding place. My laptop made a soft little sound, the kind it made when a file finished downloading. I stared at the screen because I had not been downloading anything. There was no email notification, no browser tab, no polite warning from any software that still believed in asking permission. Just a black message window where my design mock-up had been. A little rectangle of darkness sitting over the homepage concept I had been revising for a boutique hotel chain that wanted to look timeless but disruptive, which was how rich people described beige with a serif font. For 3 full seconds, I thought I had been hacked by a teenager in Ohio who was about to demand Bitcoin. Then the first line appeared. Zoe Hallberg, this concerns Marcus Vale. There are moments when the body understands before the mind catches up. My fingers went cold. My stomach clenched so sharply the noodles nearly came back up in self-defense. Marcus's name on a strange black window felt intimate in the wrong way, like finding someone else's lipstick in your bathroom drawer, except I had not found lipstick yet. I had found a door. The second line appeared. I am sending proof because guesses rot people from the inside. Under that, a password. Under the password, the file. I should have closed the laptop. I should have called someone normal, someone who used antivirus software and believed in boundaries. Instead, I typed the password with hands that looked almost calm and opened the folder that taught me exactly how much a long-term relationship could weigh when stripped of its decorations. There were screenshots of messages, not vague ones, not the kind a liar could explain with a tired smile and the phrase "you're being dramatic." Full conversations, timestamps intact. Hotel reservation confirmations, calendar entries, rideshare receipts, photos uploaded to an account Marcus must have thought nobody knew existed, which was funny in a way that would not become funny until much later, because Marcus had always been the kind of man who used the same password pattern for everything and still called himself careful. There were locations, dates, the name of the woman he had been seeing for at least 5 months, and a neat little timeline that made the last year of my life rearrange itself in cruel chronological order. The weekend he missed my gallery opening because his mother had a blood pressure scare. The night he kissed me on the forehead and said he was exhausted, then took a cab downtown to a hotel where someone named Elise had posted a picture of 2 glasses of champagne and his watch on the table between them. The morning he told me I looked tired and kissed the corner of my mouth, as if the guilt could be transferred back into me by skin contact. I did not cry at first. That is one of those details people always think means strength, and it does not. It means the shock had done such a good job evacuating my body that there was no one left inside to cry. I sat there under the yellow light of my too small Brooklyn apartment, listening to a siren drag itself down Atlantic Avenue, and clicked every file. I clicked like a woman checking invoices, like a woman learning the terms of a contract she had signed with blood and stupid hope. The proof was clinical. Devastating, yes, but clinical. Whoever had sent it had not added commentary. No little gasp emojis. No, "Girl, you need to see this." No moral performance. Just the facts, arranged with the tidiness of someone who knew that chaos was more useful when properly indexed. When the last file opened, Another message appeared. You deserved to know. R. That was it. No explanation, no phone number, no dramatic warning that the call was coming from inside the house. Just a burner address blinking at the bottom of the window like an invitation or a dare. Before we return to the story, I just want to share a quick note. This version is made for YouTube, but the extended, very hot, and uncensored GL stories will be available on my Patreon. Some scenes go deeper into desire, passion, and the private moments between the women, and those parts are too bold to include here. If you want the fuller and hotter version, you can find the details in the description below. I remember laughing once, a short, ugly sound that startled me more than the files had. You deserve to know. People said things like that when they wanted credit for being decent. They said it after they dropped a grenade in your living room and politely stepped over the debris. So, naturally, I replied, I wish I could tell you I waited until morning, made tea, called my best friend Talia, and proceeded with grace. I did none of those things. I wrote, "Who the hell are you?" Then I deleted hell and wrote fuck, because accuracy matters in crisis. Then I sat there in the blue spill of my screen with sesame noodles cooling beside me, waiting for a stranger to answer a question my boyfriend should have saved me from needing to ask. The reply came 9 minutes later. Someone with, unfortunately, good timing. I stared at it so hard my eyes burned. That was the moment I met Remy, though I did not know her name yet. I knew only the initial, the strange restraint of her evidence, and the immediate, infuriating fact that she wrote like a person leaning against a doorframe. Calm, dry. Too pleased with herself, I typed back, "That is not an answer." "No," she replied, "it is a description. Are you blackmailing him?" Not tonight. The word tonight hit me wrong. I sat up straighter. Are you blackmailing me? If I were, I'd start with someone richer. I should have been scared. A normal woman would have been scared. I was angry enough to mistake fear for fuel. I wrote, "Explain yourself before I call the police." The pause after that was longer. Outside, rain began tapping against the fire escape, light and irritating, the way New York rain often is before it decides whether to become weather or just an insult. Finally, the answer appeared. You can call them. They'll tell you to change your passwords and stop opening files from strangers. Annoyingly, they'll be right. I hated her immediately. Not in the serious way. In the bright, sparking way, the way you hate someone who refuses to stand in the shape you've assigned them. I wanted her to be creepy or self-righteous or guilty. I wanted a villain with a hoodie and a basement. Instead, I had a sentence that sounded like a smirk. "Why did you send this?" I wrote. "Because I found it." That is still not an explanation. It's the part before the explanation. Do you always answer questions like this? Only the ones I don't trust. You don't trust me. I don't know you. You sent me a digital autopsy of my relationship. That is one way to put it. It is the correct way to put it. Another pause. Then, I was doing unrelated security work. Marcus's name appeared where it should not have. I looked closer. Then I looked too close. The evidence involved you, so I gave it to you. That's all. Unrelated security work. Gray words. Words with curtains over them. I knew enough about the world to understand that people who said unrelated security work instead of my job were either boring consultants or criminals with better lighting. I looked at the black window, at the letter R, at my own reflection faintly superimposed over the screen. My hair was piled on top of my head with a pencil through it. Mascara smudged under one eye. I looked like someone who had been interrupted mid-collapse. "What's your name?" I wrote. No. I laughed again, and this time it came out closer to alive. No? No. Then why sign R? Politeness. That is not politeness. That is branding. I have been accused of worse. I did not know then that Remy could make the smallest sentence feel like a hand under the chin. I did not know that she would later use silence the same way, not as absence, but as pressure. I did not know she drank whiskey neat because she said ice was what people added when they wanted to pretend they disliked what they had ordered. I did not know she drove an old black Audi like she had a personal grudge against the concept of braking. I did not know she would once show up outside my studio with soup because I had texted the word fine with a period. At 11:59 on that Tuesday night, she was only a stranger who had opened a locked room in my life and refused to step fully into the light. I closed the laptop at 1:17. I know the time because I stared at the clock for a while, waiting for pain to become something more dramatic. It did not. It became practical. I put the noodles in the fridge. I took Marcus's sweatshirt off the back of my chair and folded it carefully, which in retrospect was much more alarming than if I had set it on fire. I made a folder on my desktop called Marcus because apparently betrayal was contagious, and now I too believed in file organization. Then I slept for 42 minutes and woke up with my face dry and my chest hollow. By morning, the city had polished itself with rain. The sidewalks were black and reflective, the air sharp with garbage trucks and wet coffee carts. I watched people hurry down my block under umbrellas and wanted to grab them by the shoulders and say, "Did you know?" Did everyone know and just forget to mention it? Instead, I brushed my teeth until my gums hurt, put on black jeans and a blazer that made me look more capable than I felt, and went to work in Dumbo because capitalism, unlike heartbreak, did not pause for narrative significance. I spent the morning moving typography 2 pixels to the left, while my phone sat face down beside my keyboard like a small animal I did not trust. Marcus texted at 10:08. "Morning, beautiful. Sorry I crashed last night. Dinner ran late. See you tonight?" There it was, the casual violence of ordinary language after extraordinary betrayal. "Morning, beautiful. Dinner ran late. See you tonight." I read it once, then opened the folder again and stared at a rideshare receipt from 12:46 a.m. ending at a boutique hotel on the Lower East Side. The receipt was not angry. That made it worse. "Documents never had the decency to sound outraged on your behalf." I replied, "Yes." Then I walked to the bathroom and threw up. The confrontation happened in my apartment at 8:32 p.m., under the same yellow light where I had opened the files. Marcus arrived with flowers, which was an insult so traditional it felt almost lazy. White tulips, my favorite. Or rather, his favorite thing to buy me because I had once said they looked clean on my kitchen table. He kissed my cheek and said, "You look tired." I said, "Funny. You look busy." He smiled the smile that had gotten him out of small trouble for years. Marcus was handsome in a way that taught you nothing about him. Dark hair, careful jaw, expensive coat, the kind of clean skin men get praised for when women have curated it for them in silence. We had been together 4 years, which is long enough to build habits around someone's breathing. Long enough to know how they take their coffee and not know what they do after they tell you goodnight. "Rough day?" he asked, setting the tulips on the counter. You could call it research heavy. He paused because Marcus was not stupid. That was important. Stupid men cheat badly. Smart men cheat in ways that make you feel stupid for trusting them. Zoe. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. I had expected denial. Everyone expects denial. It is the ritual, the first dance. Instead, Marcus went very still. His face did something I had never seen before. Not guilt exactly, not even fear, but calculation stripped of manners. His eyes moved quickly over the screenshots, the timestamps, the receipt I had left open like a little centerpiece. "Where did you get this?" he asked. It was the wrong question. The first wrong question in a night full of them. "That's what you're leading with?" "Zoe, where did you get this?" I leaned back against the counter and crossed my arms so he would not see my hands shaking. "A fairy. She came through the window with a tiny subpoena." "This isn't funny." "God, Marcus, I know. I am absolutely failing to find the comedy in your 5-month hotel tour." His mouth tightened. "You went through my accounts?" "No, someone else did." That landed. Not cleanly, not like a confession, but like a threat he had not anticipated. Who? I don't know. You don't know. I know an initial. Should I ask her for a business card next time she ruins my life for free? He flinched at her. Interesting, I thought. Absurdly. Because my brain had decided to take notes from the wreckage. Zoe, listen to me. Whatever you think, do not. I held up a hand. Do not start a sentence with whatever you think when I have PDFs. It is disrespectful to the file format. For a second, he looked almost bewildered. And that was the first moment I understood how much of our relationship had depended on my willingness to soften myself around his discomfort. Marcus was used to me angry. Yes, but not precise. He was used to my sarcasm arriving with a door left open behind it. He was used to me making space for his explanation before he had earned the oxygen. Elise was a mistake, he said. She appears to have required several calendar reminders. It didn't mean anything. Try again. He dragged both hands through his hair. I was unhappy. There it was, the little key men use when they want to unlock sympathy from the woman they wounded. I was unhappy. As if unhappiness were a weather system, as if it had swept him into hotel rooms and private messages and lies over breakfast. I looked at him then, really looked, and felt the strangest thing. Not relief, not yet, but a crack in the illusion so wide I could see daylight through it. So you made sure I would be too, I said. His expression shifted. That's not fair. No, Marcus. Fair would have been telling me before you turned our life into a case file. Our life? He laughed, and it was the first ugly sound of the night. You mean the life where you work until midnight and treat me like a houseplant with a gym membership? I blinked. Pain has layers. I had been braced for the cheating. I had not been braced for the inventory of resentments, the way he pulled them out like receipts he had been saving for a discount on guilt. He talked for 15 minutes. About my hours, my independence, my walls. The way I made jokes instead of being vulnerable, as if his affair had been a customer service complaint. I remember thinking, with ridiculous clarity, that Remy would have organized the speech better. When he finally stopped, I said, "Leave your keys." His face changed again, softer now, the charm attempting a comeback. Zoe. Keys, Marcus. You don't mean that. I mean it so much I'm bored by how much I mean it. He stepped closer. We can fix this. I did not move. I am not a website with a broken checkout page. You're being cruel. Good. I was worried it wasn't translating. He stared at me for a long second, and I saw something in him harden. Not heartbreak. Ownership insulted by eviction. He took his keys off the ring slowly and set them on the counter beside the tulips. You're going to regret this. Probably, I said. I regret bangs from 2016. I survive. He left with the flowers still on the counter. I threw them out at midnight, then took them back out of the trash because the building had mice and even devastated women have standards. The first message from R after the confrontation came at 12:22 a.m. He took it badly. I stared at my phone in the dark and should have been disturbed that she knew anything had happened. I was disturbed. I was also grateful, which made me irritated enough to sit up. Are you watching me? I wrote. No. Marcus? Not exactly. That is not reassuring. It was not designed to be. I rubbed my forehead and considered blocking her, which would have been a sensible choice if sensible choices had not just spent 4 years sharing a toothbrush charger with Marcus Vale. How do you know? He tried to find out who sent you the files. How? Badly. I imagined her somewhere in the city, lit by screens, amused by male incompetence and my poor life decisions. The image should not have been comforting. It was. What did he do? Enough for me to pay attention. There it was, the first hint of the thing she would later call protection, with an expression so neutral it circled back around to arrogant. I did not ask for details. Partly because I did not want to know, partly because I suspected she would not tell me, and partly because some shameful, exhausted part of me liked the idea that someone was paying attention without needing me to beg. Go to sleep, R wrote. I stared at the message. Are you giving me orders now? Suggestions with better posture? I hate you. No, you don't. I hated that she was right. For 2 days, Marcus disappeared. Or rather, he performed disappearance badly. He did not text. He did not call. He watched my Instagram stories from an account named after his college lacrosse number, which was either pathetic or performance art. I changed passwords. I changed the lock on my apartment. I put his things into 2 boxes with the ruthless efficiency of a woman terrified that if she touched anything too long, it would become memory instead of trash. I worked. I slept in pieces. I told Talia, who said, I will kill him, with the weary sincerity of a Brooklyn Pilates instructor who had never killed anyone but owned enough leggings to hide a body. I did not tell her about R. Not at first. The stranger felt too strange to explain, and maybe, if I am honest, too private. Then Marcus started showing up. The first time was outside my office. I came out of the building at 6, collar turned up against the wind coming off the East River, and there he was, leaning against a lamppost with 2 coffees in his hands, like we were in a montage from a version of my life with better lighting. Dumbo at dusk is cruelly beautiful. All cobblestones and warehouse windows glowing amber, the Manhattan Bridge throwing its blue steel frame across the sky. I hated that he had chosen a cinematic backdrop for his apology. We need to talk, he said. No, we need regulatory oversight of men who use that sentence. Zoe. I kept walking. He fell into step beside me. You won't answer my calls. Look at you, solving mysteries. I'm worried about you. That stopped me. You are worried about me? Yes. Marcus, if you were worried about me, you would have worn a condom in your secret life and left me out of it. His face reddened. Keep your voice down. Oh, that's the line? Volume? People moved around us, coats pulled tight, faces turned toward the subway. New Yorkers are masters at noticing everything and admitting nothing. Marcus looked embarrassed, which gave me an unexpected sliver of pleasure. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. You don't know who sent those files. You don't know what kind of person is involved. I know what kind of person cheated on me. That's not the same thing. No, one of them gave me information. His jaw flexed. You always do this. You turn everything into a joke so nobody can tell you you're scared. It was accurate enough to hurt, which made me cruel enough to smile. And you turn everything into concern so nobody can tell you you're controlling. His hand closed around my wrist. It was not violent. That is the thing. If I had told the story badly, if I had wanted people to gasp, I could say he grabbed me, and that would be true in the most basic sense. But it was not dramatic. It was worse because it was familiar, his fingers rapping where they had rapped 1,000 times before, in restaurants, in taxis, on sidewalks when he wanted to steer me gently away from traffic or conversation. Ownership often borrows the gestures of care. It took me half a second too long to pull free. Don't touch me, I said. He let go immediately. Hands raised, wounded innocence snapping into place. I'm trying to help. Try from farther away. I left him there with 2 coffees and a face full of injured masculinity. My wrist tingled all the way home. That night, R sent one line at 2:03 a.m. You should have let me handle the lamppost prints. I sat up so fast I knocked over the glass of water on my nightstand. What the actual fuck? Normal greeting. Were you there? No. Then how? He's not subtle. That was not an answer, but by then I knew her well enough, or thought I did, to understand that every answer from R arrived wearing a trench coat. I called the burner address. I do not know why I expected it to work. It did. The voice that answered was lower than I expected. Smooth, amused, and close enough to my ear through the speaker that I pulled the phone back and stared at it like it had changed shape. Zoe, she said. My name in her mouth did something I was unprepared to analyze. R. Very dramatic of you to call. Very creepy of you to know where my ex corners me on public streets. He didn't corner you. He staged himself badly outside your office and hoped nostalgia would do the heavy lifting. I stood barefoot in the dark, water soaking into the rug, my pulse behaving in ways not approved by feminism. Who are you? There was a tiny pause. A breath, maybe. Remy. Just that. No last name, no credential, no explanation. But the name altered the room. R became Remy, and suddenly the initial had cheekbones, or so my imagination insisted without permission. Remy. It sounded like someone who knew exits. Remy what? Ambitious. Remy, I swear to God. Vale's using a friend to ask around about you, she said, voice sharpening slightly beneath the ease. Your building, your schedule, whether you're seeing anyone. It may be nothing. It may be him trying to feel in control. But I don't like the shape of it. I forgot the rug. What shape? The kind that thinks your boundaries are a negotiation. Hearing it from someone else made my throat tighten. I hated that too. He's not dangerous. People don't have to be dangerous to be a problem. You sound like a fortune cookie with a concealed carry permit. I don't carry. That is not the comforting half of the sentence. She laughed then, softly, and the sound moved through me like a match dragged along the side of a box. Not a big laugh, not performative, just a private bit of amusement she had decided to share. Let me help. There it was. No, I said automatically. You haven't heard the offer. I heard the tone. My tone is excellent. Your tone is a leather jacket in sentence form. You noticed. I closed my eyes. I don't know you. You know I told you the truth. I know you invaded several people's privacy and then sent me a heartbreak zip file. Also true. I can handle Marcus. I'm sure. No, you're not. No, she said, and for once there was no amusement in it. I'm not. The silence after that was different. It had weight. I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling the cold, wet patch under one foot and the absurd heat in my face. What exactly are you offering? I asked. Documentation, pressure where pressure is useful, quiet conversations with people who understand liability. Nothing theatrical. Protection, I said, tasting the word. If you need a name for it. And what do you get? Another pause. When she spoke again, the smirk had returned, but softer. The satisfaction of being right. About what? That you'd ask. I should have said no. I want that on record. I should have insisted on doing everything alone, because that was my brand apparently, and because letting a stranger step closer after one man had betrayed me was idiotic. Instead, I looked around my bedroom, at the shadowed pile of Marcus's boxed belongings by the door, at the water spreading on my rug, at my own tired reflection in the dark window, and felt too exhausted to perform invulnerability for an audience of no one. Fine, I said, but I want transparency. Terrible word. I mean it. I'll tell you what matters. That is not transparency. It's survivable. You are insufferable. Yes, Remy said, but currently useful. Marcus lasted 9 days against Remy's version of usefulness. I never learned every detail, which is probably for the best. I know she helped me put together a record of every unwanted contact. I know she found out his company had policies about harassment that Marcus had apparently never read, because men who rely on charm rarely study consequences. I know she sent me screenshots of his messages to mutual acquaintances asking where I was, each one annotated with dry comments like subtle as a piano falling downstairs. I know that after I forwarded one carefully worded email to him, drafted with Remy's help and my rage, Marcus became abruptly, beautifully busy with not contacting me. Did you threaten him? I asked during one of our calls. No. Remy. I introduced him to the possibility of documentation. That sounds like a threat wearing glasses. I have excellent eyesight. By the time I met her in person, I had built 3 versions of her in my head. The first was a woman made entirely of black clothing and bad choices, all sharp angles and impossible cool. The second was a pale indoor creature with 10 monitors, a hoodie, and the sleep schedule of a raccoon. The third, which arrived later and annoyed me deeply, had her mouth near my ear and no clear profession at all. The real Remy was leaning against the outside wall of a coffee shop in the West Village at 10 on a windy Sunday morning, holding 2 paper cups and looking like she had bribed the weather. She had short dark hair that fell into her eyes in a way that should have been accidental but seemed negotiated. Her face was not traditionally perfect. It was better than that. A strong nose, full mouth, brows that looked unimpressed by most legal systems. She wore black jeans, a charcoal coat, and boots with scuffed toes. And when she saw me, she smiled like she had already heard the argument I was about to start and was fond of it. I stopped 3 feet away. Absolutely not. Her smile widened. Good morning to you too. You cannot look like that. I dressed down. That's worse. She handed me a coffee. Oat milk latte. Extra shot. You pretend you don't need the extra shot, but your emails say otherwise. I took it because my body betrayed my principles. My emails do not say that. Your punctuation does. I had imagined this meeting a dozen ways. I had planned to interrogate her. I had planned to demand boundaries. I had planned to be composed enough that she understood I was not one of her little projects. Instead, I held the coffee too tightly and looked at her mouth for half a second too long. Remy noticed. Of course she did. Her expression did not change much, but something warmed in her eyes. You're taller than I thought. You thought about my height? I'm observant. That is not a denial. No. The coffee shop was crowded, all tiny tables and people pretending their novels were not screenplays. We took a corner by the window because Remy had already chosen it, obviously. Outside, an elderly man in a camel coat argued with a parking meter. A woman walked 3 dachshunds in matching sweaters. The city continued its work of being ridiculous and alive. In person, Remy was both more and less unnerving. Less shadowy, because she slouched in her chair and stole a piece of my almond croissant without asking, and because her laugh looked younger than the rest of her. More unnerving, because her attention had weight. When I spoke, she listened with the stillness of someone used to separating signal from noise. She asked about work, and somehow did not make it sound like filler. She asked whether I had always wanted to be a designer. No, I said. At 7, I wanted to be a marine biologist. Then I realized fish don't care about font pairings. A tragic loss for the ocean. I would have rebranded coral reefs. They need it. I smiled despite myself and looked down at my coffee. My father drew signs for bodegas when I was little. Not professionally. Just a guy with steady hands and opinions about lettering. I used to sit on the counter and watch him paint names on glass. He'd tell me every letter had a mood. Remy's expression shifted. Not softer exactly, but more careful. He sounds wonderful. He was. I traced the rim of my cup. He died when I was 19. I'm sorry. I shrugged, because old grief has muscle memory. Cancer. Very original of him. Remy did not laugh. She did not look away either. Do you still paint letters by hand? The question caught me. Not do you miss him? Not how did it happen? Not one of those grief questions people ask because they want to be seen being gentle. Do you still paint letters by hand? As if she understood that loss lived in the continuation of small practices, not the performance of sorrow. Sometimes, I said, when I'm stuck. I'd like to see that. My throat went tight for no logical reason. You're very good at asking dangerous questions. I'm better at not asking the obvious ones. That sounds exhausting. It saves time. You're not what I expected, I said. Remy leaned back. Disappointed? No. Careful. That sounded honest. Don't get attached. Her eyes held mine over the rim of her coffee. Too late. She said it lightly. She said everything lightly when it mattered. But the air between us changed, just enough that I felt it on my skin. I looked away first, furious with myself, furious with Marcus, furious with the small, treacherous part of me that had begun blooming under a stranger's attention before the last wound had even closed. That was the first day. There were others. Remy began appearing in my life in ways that were technically arranged, but felt inevitable. A coffee in Soho between meetings, where she sat across from me and redlined a demand letter Marcus had sent through a friend who had gone to law school and apparently learned nothing about tone. A late drink in the East Village at a bar with red vinyl booths and a bartender who called everyone sweetheart with surgical neutrality. A walk through Chinatown after I had a fight with Talia about whether I'm fine was a personality disorder. Remy bought pineapple buns from a bakery on Mott Street and handed me one without asking if I wanted it. You feed people when you're worried, I said. I outsource tenderness to carbohydrates. Healthier than what? Most things I do. Sometimes she was provocatively unhelpful. Sometimes she refused to answer direct questions and then remembered details I had mentioned once at midnight 6 days before. She knew I hated cilantro, loved bad museum gift shops, and measured stress by how violently I cleaned my keyboard. She knew I had stopped wearing the necklace Marcus gave me, but had not taken it out of the little dish by my bed, because removal felt too ceremonial. She knew I disliked being called brave, because people mostly said it when they wanted suffering to look decorative. I knew almost nothing comparable about her, except that she lived somewhere in the Lower East Side, had one sister she described as morally superior but poorly dressed, and had once worked for a company whose name she would not say because, in her words, they still employ lawyers with no hobbies. The imbalance should have bothered me more. It did bother me. But Remy had a way of giving presents instead of biography, and presents after Marcus felt indecently luxurious. Marcus had told me everything and revealed almost nothing. Remy told me almost nothing, and somehow sat in the truth like a person who had found the most comfortable chair in a burning room. The fire escape happened 3 weeks after the first message. It was midnight, and Manhattan was slick with late spring rain. I had been trapped in a client presentation until 10, then had taken the F train home with half my soul missing and a headache blooming behind my eyes. Remy texted as I was unlocking my apartment. Have you eaten? I looked at the bag of tortilla chips on my counter and considered lying. I wrote, define eaten. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Open your window in 12 minutes. That is either romantic or how raccoons enter. I'm taller than a raccoon. Unproven. 12 minutes later, a paper bag appeared through my living room window from the fire escape, followed by Remy's face, rain-damp hair falling into her eyes, expression deeply pleased with herself. You're insane, I said, stepping back. You buzzed me in last week. Your building door sticks. That is not an explanation for vertical trespassing. I brought dumplings. Come in like a person. She looked down at the narrow metal platform, then back at me. But then we wouldn't have ambiance? Were you in the neighborhood? I asked. No. At least lie better. I wanted to see you. There it was again, said simply enough that it bypassed every defense I had prepared for charm. I looked down at the dumplings. That's inconvenient. Yes. For who? She bumped her shoulder lightly against mine. The dumplings, mainly. They were hoping for a quiet night. I laughed, but it came out thin. Remy noticed. She always noticed. Her gaze moved over my face, the way my hair had been twisted up, the tension around my mouth. What happened? She asked. Nothing. Zoe. I hated my name when Marcus said it by the end. He used it like a leash, like a warning. Remy said it like a key turning gently in a lock. I exhaled. I found a photo. Old one. Me and Marcus at Coney Island 2 summers ago. We look happy. I look stupid. You weren't stupid. I was in a sundress, eating cotton candy with a man who was probably already cheating on me. That doesn't make you stupid. What does it make me? Someone who trusted the person she loved. I looked at her. Rain had collected on her lashes, the alley light cut along her cheekbone. You say things like you're reading from a manual called How Not to Get Punched by Women in Crisis. I wrote the appendix. Of course you did. She smiled, but it faded quickly. Marcus's choices don't get to rewrite your feelings into evidence against you. I wanted to make a joke. I felt it rise automatically, a reflexive little shield. Something about cross-examining my sundress. But Remy was looking at me, really looking, and the joke died before it reached my mouth. That's very mature, I said instead. Don't tell anyone. I'll encrypt it. Proud of you. We ate in silence for a while. Her knee touched mine once, accidental or pretending to be. Heat moved through me so sudden it almost embarrassed me. I had never been with a woman. I had admired women, envied women, loved my friends with ferocious devotion, once kissed a girl in college during a game, and then spent 3 months pretending I had not thought about it. Desire, for me, had always come with a script, and Marcus had fit the role so neatly that I mistook the role for truth. Remy did not fit any script I had been handed. She looked at me, and the page went blank. She reached over to brush a drop of sauce from the corner of my thumb. Not with a napkin, with her finger. A small, thoughtless movement, maybe. Her skin touched mine for less than a second. My breath caught like a teenager's. Remy went still. I pulled my hand back too late. Her eyes lifted to mine, darker than the rainy metal around us. Zoe. Do not say my name like that. Like what? Like you know what it's doing. Her mouth curved, but the amusement did not hide the heat. I have theories. Keep them peer-reviewed. I prefer field research. The air between us tightened so fast I felt dizzy. The alley, the rain, the television across the way. All of it seemed to move back. Remy's shoulder was warm against mine. Her hand rested on the metal between us, close enough that I could see a small scar across one knuckle. I could have touched it. I wanted to. I wanted so much that the wanting frightened me clean. Instead, I reached for another dumpling and dropped it into my lap. Remy looked down, then up. Smooth. I am going through a lot. I can tell. The dumpling never stood a chance. The laugh broke the tension just enough for me to breathe. Remy let it break. I would understand later how much restraint lived in that. She could have leaned in. She could have turned the moment into something neither of us were ready to name. Instead, she handed me a napkin and looked out over the alley, the corner of her mouth still warm, with almost, if love were only about grand confessions, I might have missed it. But it starts, sometimes, when someone gives the moment back to you without making you pay for wanting it. Marcus finally stopped being a daily problem in early May. Remy's documentation had reached enough ears that his sudden interest in my whereabouts became professionally inconvenient. He sent one long email that used the word closure 3 times and accountability 0 times, which I took as a sign of his emotional growth being still in beta. I did not answer. I archived it. Then I opened my design software and worked for 6 hours straight, not because I was healed, but because I had learned that survival often looks like making a deadline while your life lies in pieces under the desk. When I told Remy, she sent, "Good." Then 20 minutes later, he should still stay gone. It was not jealousy. Not yet. Or maybe it was, but shaped like vigilance. Remy did not say things like, "I don't want him near you." She said, "He should still stay gone," and the sentence had a locked door inside it. I should have been relieved when Marcus faded. Instead, I panicked. Without him as the official reason for Remy's presence, everything between us stood there, naked and badly lit. The calls became harder to justify. The coffees more obviously unnecessary. The late texts were no longer tied to evidence or strategy. We were, horrifyingly, choosing them. So I did what any emotionally healthy woman would do. I went on a date with someone else. His name was Adrian, and he lived on the 4th floor of my building. He was a photographer, which in New York can mean artist, bartender, trust fund survivor, or man with 3 cameras and a mattress on the floor. Adrian was harmless, sweet, and handsome in a soft-eyed way. He had been friendly for months, and after he helped me carry a box of Marcus's abandoned books to the donation bin, he asked if I wanted to get a drink sometime. I said yes because I wanted to prove something to whom I could not have said. Marcus, maybe. Remy, definitely. Myself, badly. We went to a wine bar in Fort Greene with tiny candles and a menu that described olives as curated. Adrian wore a denim jacket and asked kind questions. He listened. He laughed at the right places. He told me about photographing laundromats at night because they were little glass boxes of loneliness, which was either beautiful or grounds for concern. I tried to be present. I tried not to check my phone. I tried not to compare the way he looked at me, openly appreciative, to the way Remy looked at me, like she was pretending not to want to put her hand at the small of my back and failing in a language only I could read. At 9:14, my phone buzzed. Enjoying the olives? I stared at the message until Adrian asked if everything was okay. Work, I lied, because apparently betrayal had also made me unimaginative. I excused myself and stepped outside. Fort Greene was damp and green-smelling after rain, the sidewalks shining under streetlights, brownstone stoops holding little pockets of conversation. I called Remy. She answered on the second ring. I hear the Olive program is ambitious. How do you know where I am? Hello, Zoe. How are you? I'm well. Thank you for asking. Remy. A pause. Then lightly. I'm at the bar across the street. I turned slowly. Across the street, beneath a striped awning, Remy sat alone at an outdoor table with a glass in front of her and one ankle crossed over the other, like a woman waiting for a painting to explain itself. She raised 2 fingers in a small salute. I should have been furious. I was furious. I was also so aware of her that my skin felt too tight. I crossed the street without looking for cars, which earned me a honk and one educational hand gesture from a cab driver. Remy watched me approach with composed interest. Completely normal coincidence, I said. Extremely. You followed me. No. You were sitting across from my date. I was here first. Were you? I could have been. That is not how time works. She took a sip from her glass. Whiskey, probably. You said yes to the laundromat poet. You know his name. Do I? Remy. Adrian, she said, and the name came out flat enough to make my stomach dip. Not cruel, not mocking. Worse, measured. I stood over her table, arms crossed. Did you look him up? He has a public website. Yes? Are you jealous? Remy's face did not change. That was how I knew I had hit something living. She leaned back, thumb moving once along the side of her glass. Don't flatter him. I felt the sentence like a hand closing around the room. That is not a no. It's a correction. Remy. What? You have no right to act territorial. I'm not acting territorial. You are one growl away from peeing on the hydrant. That startled a laugh out of her, but it vanished quickly. She looked toward the wine bar window, where Adrian was visible in warm candlelight, checking his phone with polite patience. When she looked back, her eyes were cool in a way that radiated heat. I'm making sure you're safe. From curated olives? From proving a point with a man you don't want? The accuracy of it struck sparks. You don't know what I want. Remy's gaze moved over my face, slow and unkind only in its precision. No. The street seemed to go quiet around us. A dog barked somewhere. Music slipped out when the bar door opened behind her. I should have said no again. I should have turned around and gone back to Adrian, who was kind and uncomplicated and did not make my life feel like a live wire. Instead, I stood there while Remy looked at me, and I thought, with sudden terrible clarity, she knows because I keep letting her. You don't get to do this, I said, lower now. Do what? Stand outside the thing you refuse to name and make faces when I try to walk away from it. Her jaw tightened. For the first time since I had met her, Remy looked cornered. Not beaten. Never that. But caught between deflection and truth with no elegant exit. I don't make faces, she said. I gave her a look. I have one face. It is an extremely opinionated face. The corner of her mouth twitched. Zoe, no. I stepped closer to the table, anger and something else curling together under my ribs. If you're going to be possessive, have the decency to be honest about what you think is yours. There. The words landed between us like glass. Remy's fingers stilled on the tumbler. Her eyes lifted to mine and something unguarded flashed there, so quick I could have missed it if I had not been starving for proof. I don't think you're mine, she said quietly. That should have been the end of it. A mature statement, a boundary. A sensible correction from a woman who existed mostly in controlled fragments. But then she looked away toward the wine bar window again and added, almost under her breath, "That's the problem." The air changed. My anger did not vanish. It transformed, molecule by molecule, into something more dangerous. I stood on the Fort Greene sidewalk with my ex-boyfriend finally out of my immediate life, a kind man waiting for me across the street, and a woman I did not understand looking at me like restraint was becoming a physical injury. Remy, I said. She shook her head once, as if warning herself more than me. Go finish your date. You cannot drop that sentence and then tell me to go eat emotional olives. That got the smallest smile from her, but her eyes remained serious. I can. I just did. Coward. Yes, she said. I had no reply for that. Honesty, when it finally arrived, had terrible timing. I went back to Adrian. I apologized. I told him I was not ready to date, which was true in every direction except the one that mattered. He was kind about it, because some people have the emotional decency to be minor characters without making a federal case of it. He walked me home under a light rain, kissed my cheek at the building door, and said he hoped I found whatever I was looking for. I think it found me, I said before I could stop myself. He smiled sadly. That sounds inconvenient. Everyone was using my word now. Very rude. Remy did not text that night. Neither did I. I lay awake listening to my apartment creak, my phone face down beside me like a dare I refused to take. At 2:37, it buzzed once. You were right. Nothing else. I picked it up, stared at the message, and felt my heart do the humiliating little leap hearts do when they have not been consulted. I wrote back, about which part? There were many. The reply came almost immediately. All the annoying ones. I smiled in the dark despite myself. Then I put the phone down and did not answer because I had one shred of dignity left and wanted it to die of natural causes. 2 days later, after the last of the Marcus situation had gone quiet enough that neither of us could pretend anymore, Remy asked me to come over and look at the final notes. She called it documentation. I called it a transparent excuse. I went anyway. Remy lived on the 4th floor of a narrow building on the Lower East Side above a shop that sold vintage lamps and smelled like hot dust. Her apartment was not what I expected, partly because I expected nothing coherent. The room had high ceilings, exposed brick that had survived gentrification by becoming expensive, and tall windows overlooking a street where delivery bikes moved like restless insects. There were books everywhere, on shelves, stacked on the floor, half open on the kitchen counter. Not just tech books, novels, art monographs, essays with cracked spines. A framed black and white photograph of 2 girls sat on a shelf near the window, one teenage and scowling, the other younger and grinning with a gap between her teeth. Remy and her sister, I guessed. 3 monitors occupied a desk in the corner, but they were asleep. The rest of the apartment felt unexpectedly human. A dark green sofa, a record player, a chipped mug full of pens, a plant that was either thriving or threatening legal action. "You own color," I said, hanging my jacket on the chair she indicated. "Don't tell anyone." "Your reputation as a morally ambiguous trench coat is safe with me." "I don't own a trench coat." Spiritually. She had ordered Thai food from a place that sent enough containers to suggest either generosity or poor portion management. We ate at her small kitchen table under a pendant light that made everything intimate, whether it deserved to be or not. Remy wore a black sweater with the sleeves pushed to her elbows, and I spent an embarrassing amount of time noticing her forearms. She moved through the apartment with the ease of someone who liked being alone, but had made room for me anyway. After dinner, she opened her laptop and showed me the final record of Marcus's contact, the message trail, the clean little summary that would sit ready if he tried anything again. It was useful. It was thorough. It took 12 minutes. "Well," I said when she closed the laptop, "that was an extremely convincing administrative pretext." Remy leaned back in her chair. "I don't know what you mean." "You invited me here for 12 minutes of documentation and 90 minutes of curry. You're a designer. I assumed you appreciated presentation." "Remy." "Zoe." The way she said my name was different now. Not the fire escape, not warning. Something lower, almost tired. The professional frame had done its last good deed and was lying dead on the table between us. I stood because sitting still had become impossible. I wandered to the window. Outside, Orchard Street gleamed with recent rain, neon signs smearing color onto the pavement. A couple argued gently beside a parked delivery truck. Someone laughed from an upstairs window. New York, endlessly intrusive, kept reminding me that life did not pause just because I was trying not to fall in love with a woman who thought emotional disclosure required an escape route. Remy came to stand beside me, not too close. The restraint in the distance was maddening. "Are you always like this?" I asked. Vague question. Careful, controlled. 3 jokes away from honesty. "Yes." The answer came too easily. I turned to look at her. "That wasn't a joke." "No." Her face in the window light looked more open than I had ever seen it, which meant maybe 10% open, but with Remy that felt indecent. She looked down at her hands, flexed them once, then looked back at me. "I'm not good at being wanted," she said. It was so quiet I almost thought I had imagined it. Of all the truths she could have given me, that was not the one I expected. Not "I'm scared." Not "I don't do relationships." Not one of the fashionable evasions people use to sound damaged and unavailable in the same breath. "I'm not good at being wanted." Something in me hurt for her with such tenderness, it frightened me. "Why?" Her mouth shifted, not quite a smile. "That's the follow-up question, unfortunately." "You don't have to answer." "I know." She looked out the window. For a while, I thought she would leave it there. Then she said, "People liked what I could do before they liked me." It gets confusing. No grand tragedy. No dramatic childhood monologue. Just a sentence with a locked room behind it. I thought about Marcus liking the version of me that required the least from him. I thought about my own exhausting pride, how I had turned self-sufficiency into a performance, and then resented people for applauding. I thought about Remy asking whether I still painted letters by hand. The fire escape dumplings, the way she stayed close without touching when touching would have been easier. "I don't want what you can do," I said. Her eyes moved to mine. "That's not true," I added. "I enjoy the occasional felony-adjacent competence, but it's not why I'm here." "Why are you here?" The question was simple. The answer was not. My heart was beating too hard, but I did not look away. "Because when you look at me, I don't feel like a problem someone is trying to solve. I feel like a person someone is trying very hard not to touch. Her breath changed. Am I wrong? I asked. No, she said. The city moved outside the glass. Somewhere below, a horn blared and someone shouted, but the apartment had narrowed to the space between us. Remy lifted her hand slowly, giving me enough time to move, to joke, to ruin it with fear. I did none of those things. Her fingers touched my jaw with impossible care. Not possession, not demand. A question asked against skin. My eyes closed before I could pretend I was composed. Zoe, she said, and this time I let my name be what it was. I kissed her first. I still take pride in that, though Remy later disputed the sequence on technical grounds because, according to her, leaning counts as intent. I maintain that intent is not jurisdiction. What I know is that I stepped into her, my hands finding the front of her sweater, and when our mouths met, the world did not explode. That would be too simple. It gathered. Everything in me that had been scattered by Marcus, by anger, by suspicion, by months of feeling foolish and replaceable, gathered into one bright, terrifying point. Remy kissed, like she listened. With focus, with patience, with an attention that made evasion impossible. Her hand slid from my jaw to the back of my neck, and the smallest sound escaped me, humiliating and honest. She paused immediately, forehead resting against mine. Okay? She asked. I almost laughed at the contrast between the woman who could dismantle a man's life through email and the woman checking on me like my consent was the only password that mattered. Yes, I whispered. Don't you dare stop in a noble way. Her smile touched my mouth. Bossy. You like it. I'm gathering evidence. Then she kissed me again, and the evidence became substantial. We moved slowly, not because there was no hunger, but because there was too much of it, and we were both afraid of what clumsiness might damage. My hands learned the shape of her shoulders. Her fingers traced the line of my spine through my shirt. We stumbled once into the table, and a takeout container fell to the floor with a soft, ridiculous slap that made us both laugh against each other. The laughter loosened something. Heat returned, deeper for having been interrupted. I had expected kissing a woman to feel like crossing a border. Instead, it felt like discovering the map had been drawn by someone else, and I had been walking with my eyes half closed. Remy's mouth was warm. Her body fit against mine in ways that startled me with their rightness. When she touched me, she did it as if asking and answering at once, patient enough that desire had room to become trust. We did not rush to the bedroom. That mattered. We found the sofa first, then the edge of the rug, then somehow the sofa again because Remy claimed my spatial awareness deteriorated under pressure, which was unfair but supported by evidence. She brought me water. I made fun of her for being gallant. She said, "Hydration is not gallantry." I said, "Says the woman with a protective complex and a curated olive habit." She looked at me then with such naked affection that my joke dissolved in my mouth. Later, much later, after the city had gone soft and blue beyond the windows, we lay tangled under a blanket on her sofa, not sleeping, not talking much either. My head rested against her shoulder. Her fingers moved idly through my hair, slower each time as if she kept forgetting herself there. "I've never done this before," I said into the quiet. Her hand paused. "With a woman?" "With anyone who made it feel this much like being awake." The silence after that was not empty. Remy turned her face into my hair. I felt her breathe in, then out. "I don't want to be a detour," she said. I lifted my head. Her expression was careful again, but the care was fragile now. I could see the fear under it. "You're not. You just ended something big. It ended before I knew it ended. That doesn't mean it didn't leave wreckage." "I know." I touched the small scar on her knuckle, the one I had noticed on the fire escape. "But you are not a rebound, Remy." Her eyes held mine. "You sound very sure." "I'm terrified. It presents similarly." She laughed softly, then looked down at our hands. I'm going to disappoint you. Probably. Her gaze snapped up. I smiled. I'm going to disappoint you too. Humans are a flawed product line. That's your comfort? My comfort is that Marcus disappointed me by lying, and you'll disappoint me by making jokes when you're afraid. The accuracy of it hit before I realized I had aimed. Remy's face shuddered slightly. Not completely, but enough. I felt the shift and wished I could pull the words back, soften them, wrap them in something. But truth, once released, has a terrible habit of wanting to stand upright. She sat up a little. That's one way to make the evening efficient. Remy. No, it's fine. There it was. The little professional tone, the polite retreat. She reached for her glass of water on the coffee table and took a sip like we were colleagues who had briefly misplaced their clothes and feelings. I sat up too, blanket gathered around me. Don't do that. Do what? Make a joke where a feeling should be. Her mouth curved. I wasn't aware there was seating assigned. I hated how quickly anger rose, not because it was fair, but because it was familiar. I recognized the move because I had invented it. The shudder, the swivel, the quick, clean redirection. I had done it to friends, to lovers, to myself in mirrors. Seeing it on Remy felt like being robbed by someone wearing my coat. You know exactly what I mean. I know you're tired. That is condescending. That is observation. God, you're such a coward. The word landed. Her eyes changed. I regretted it immediately and meant it completely, which is the worst kind of regret. Remy stood, taking the blanket from her lap and folding it once, precisely. Maybe this is a good time to call you a car. I stared at her. Wow. Zoe. No, that was elegant. Really. 10 out of 10. You went from kissing me like the building was on fire to valet service in under 5 minutes. Her jaw tightened. I'm not trying to hurt you. No, you're trying not to be here when hurting becomes possible. That's not fair. It is fair enough to be annoying. She looked away, and the hurt on her face was real. It did not soften me as much as it should have, because mine was real too. You think saying one true thing means you get to demand the rest on your schedule, she said, voice low. I think if you invite someone into your apartment, kiss them, tell them you don't want to be a detour, and then emotionally leave the room because she answers honestly, you should at least have the decency to admit you're scared. Remy laughed once, without humor. And you should have the decency to admit you like pulling truth out of people because it makes you feel less exposed. That shut me up, she continued, and now there was heat under the control. You stand there with a knife made of accuracy and call it intimacy. You think if you name the wound first, nobody can touch yours. My throat tightened. That's rich coming from a woman who turns feelings into encrypted attachments. At least I know what I'm doing. Do you? The room went quiet. Too quiet. The takeout containers sat on the kitchen counter. My shirt was inside out on the arm of the sofa. The whole apartment held evidence of tenderness that now felt almost embarrassing. Remy rubbed a hand over her face. For the first time, she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I don't know how to do this cleanly. Maybe it isn't clean. I don't do messy. Yes, I said, standing now, gathering my clothes with hands that shook only a little. I got that from the emotional hazmat suit. Zoe, no, don't say it like that now. Her face flinched, and that almost broke me. Almost, but pride is a loyal little monster. It carried me through getting dressed, through finding my jacket, through standing by her door while she looked at me as if there were 3 sentences fighting in her throat and none of them had the right papers. I won't call a car, she said finally. Excellent. I remain capable of apps. Text me when you get home. I opened the door. Professional requirement? Her eyes closed briefly. No. That one syllable almost stopped me. but I left anyway. The ride home was quiet except for the driver's GPS and the blood rushing in my ears. Brooklyn slid by in smeared light. Bodegas, closed laundromats, couples under awnings, the occasional lone man carrying flowers too late at night for anything good. I pressed my forehead to the cold window and felt the evening replay itself in fragments. Remy's hand on my jaw, her laugh against my mouth. I'm not good at being wanted. Coward. A car called like a curtain dropping. When I got home, I texted, "Home." She replied, "Good." I threw the phone onto the sofa and cried for the first time since the files arrived. Not pretty crying, not cinematic. It was angry and exhausted and slightly congested, the kind of crying that makes you aware of your own face in an unflattering way. I cried for Marcus, finally, but not because I wanted him back. I cried for the version of me who had trusted him. I cried for the woman on the fire escape who wanted to touch Remy's scar and was too scared to move. I cried because falling for someone after betrayal feels like trying to plant flowers in a field you have just watched burn. I cried because Remy had hurt me, and because I had hurt her with precision, and because precision does not make a wound cleaner. On the fourth day, I stayed late at the studio. A storm had rolled in at dusk, hard rain rattling the windows, thunder moving over Brooklyn with theatrical confidence. Everyone else left by 7. I remained at my desk, surrounded by rejected poster concepts and the quiet hum of printers, hand-lettering the title treatment for the theater project because digital tools had begun to feel too clean. My father's brushes lay open beside me, their wooden handles worn smooth from his hands and then mine. I dipped one into black ink and drew the curve of an S slowly, breathing through the line. At 8:12, the buzzer downstairs rang. I considered ignoring it. Then my phone lit up. It's raining and the noodles are becoming dramatic. I stared at the message. My heart, traitor that it was, stood up immediately. I buzzed her in. Remy appeared at the studio door 2 minutes later, wearing a dark raincoat, hair damp, holding a paper bag from a terrible Chinese place near my building that I loved with the loyalty people reserve for institutions that should have failed health inspection twice. She looked less composed than usual, not falling apart. Remy would probably maintain posture during an earthquake, but her eyes were tired, and the hand holding the bag flexed once before she spoke. "I brought terrible takeout," she said. "I see that. And an apology." "Is it also terrible?" "Parts of it are underdeveloped." Despite myself, my mouth twitched. "At least you're managing expectations." She stepped inside but did not come too close. Rain tapped against the tall windows behind me. The studio smelled like ink and wet wool and fried noodles. Remy looked around at the posters, the desks, the shelves of paper samples, the open brush case. "You paint here," she said. "Sometimes." "It suits you." I crossed my arms. "Careful." That sounded sincere. It was. I'm trying a new, horrifying approach. Bold. She set the takeout on the conference table, then looked back at me. For once, she did not start with a joke. She took a breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not because the evening got complicated. Because I made you feel disposable when I was scared. That was cruel, even if I didn't mean it that way." The apology moved through me slowly, not elegant, but real, as promised by the takeout bag. I leaned back against my desk. "You called the car." "I know." "Very villain at the end of a business meeting." I panicked. "You panicked like an executive." "I have range." I gave her a look. She swallowed. "Sorry, still under construction." I looked down at my ink-stained fingers. "I shouldn't have called you a coward." "You weren't wrong." "That doesn't mean I should have used it like a weapon." "No." Her voice was gentle now. "But I gave you the weapon and stood still." I hated how easily my anger softened when she was honest. Not vanished. Softened. There is a difference. Anger can sit beside tenderness if both are given chairs. Remy moved closer, stopping on the other side of my desk. I meant what I said that night, about not being good at being wanted. I have spent a long time being useful because useful is safer than… She searched for the word, visibly annoyed that language was not behaving. Then cherished, chosen, whatever terrible candle word belongs there. Cherished is a terrible candle word, I agreed softly. Her smile flickered. I don't know how to trust wanting without turning it into obligation or leverage. And with you, it was worse because I wanted too much too quickly, and I knew you were hurt. And I told myself restraint was noble when sometimes it was just fear with better branding. The rain filled the silence after that. I looked at her, really looked. The damp hair, the tired eyes, the mouth that had kissed me and then retreated behind jokes sharp enough to draw blood. I thought about all the ways I had mistaken self-protection for identity. I'm scared too, I said. Her gaze lifted. I know I act like I'm allergic to dependence, but I'm not actually made of reinforced glass and sarcasm. Marcus made me feel stupid for trusting him. You make me want to trust you, and that is objectively rude. A small laugh escaped her, relieved and wounded at once. But I can't be the only one standing in the room, I continued. If you want this, whatever this is, you have to stay when it gets messy. Not perfectly. I'm not asking for perfect. Perfect is suspicious and usually moisturized by lies. Just stay enough to talk. Remy nodded once. I can try. Not the corporate try. The real one. Good. And you, she said carefully, have to tell me when you're hurt before you turn the hurt into a scalpel. I looked away because she was right, and because being known is flattering until it is inconvenient. I can try. The real one? I sighed. Unfortunately. She smiled then, not the smirk, not the little sideways weapon of amusement, but something younger and unguarded. It did a stupid amount of damage to my remaining defenses. Later, when the takeout containers had gone cold and the storm had softened to a steady hush, Remy stood behind me while I painted. Not too close at first, then closer. I could feel her warmth at my back, the careful distance asking permission. I leaned back the smallest amount. She understood. Her hands settled at my waist, gentle, almost reverent. I drew a line of ink across the paper, and it wavered because my breath had changed. You are bad for craftsmanship, I murmured. I'll add it to my resume. Her chin brushed my hair. The kiss she pressed to the side of my neck was soft enough to be a question and warm enough to ruin me. I set the brush down before I destroyed the poster entirely. When I turned, she was watching my face. Not my mouth. My face. The distinction mattered. I'm here, she said. 2 words. No dramatic architecture. No speech about fate or how I had changed her life. Just, I'm here, said by a woman who ran from wanting and had come anyway with bad noodles in the rain. I believed her. I kissed her, and this time there was no collapse into urgency, no desperate proof demanded from skin. There was heat, yes. Remy could turn the space between a hand and a waist into a climate event, but beneath it was something steadier. Choice. We had already fallen into each other once. This felt like stepping closer with our eyes open. Her hands slid up my back. Mine found the damp edge of her collar and pulled her nearer. She smiled against my mouth when I muttered that her raincoat was impractical for romance. She said, "Most of my wardrobe was selected without anticipating you," I said. "Poor planning," she said. "I'm revising the system." Then there was no more joking for a while. The studio windows reflected us faintly. 2 women in a room full of paper and rain light. One ink-stained, one rain-damp, both trying to learn a language neither of us could hide behind. Remy kissed me like she had time. Like she intended to keep having time. That may not sound as thrilling as danger, but after Marcus, After evidence folders and sidewalk confrontations and nights spent mistaking vigilance for safety, time felt like the most erotic promise in the world. We did not name the future that night. I am glad we did not. Names can become cages when applied too quickly. Instead, we cleaned up the takeout. We washed ink from my hands in the tiny studio sink, Remy standing behind me, chin on my shoulder, pretending she was not deeply pleased when the water ran gray. We argued about whether terrible noodles counted as an apology meal or a felony against cuisine. We turned off the lights one by one. At the door, she took my hand in a way that was simple enough to undo me. Outside, Brooklyn smelled washed and electric. The rain had stopped. The sidewalks glittered under the streetlights, and the canal in the distance reflected a broken strip of moon. Remy offered to drive me home. I said I valued my life. She said statistically I should fear taxis more. I said statistically she should stop treating red lights like suggestions from a committee. She looked offended. Then she opened the passenger door for me anyway. In the car, she did not speed. Much. Her hand rested on the gear shift between us. At a red light on 4th Avenue, I placed my hand over hers. She looked down, then at me, and the smile that crossed her face was small, private, almost disbelieving. What? I asked. Nothing. Liar. Recovering liar. That's not a category. It is now. I kept my hand on hers until the light changed.